Ahoy hoy gang, if this is your first time with us, welcome! And if you're joining us from a previous video, hey, we love to see it and I hope you're doing well. It's Season 3! Our first proper episode order of the series with a hearty 23 episodes to go through. So let's not dilly nor dally, we've got to ask those 3 age-old questions. What worked, what failed, what smart toilet heist will be curtailed? There's praise to decree here in Season 3. It's our season premiere! After the leader of a biker gang is sent off at Mort's, the entire gang proceeds to hang out at Bob's and Critter ends up giving him a card to call in a favor whenever he needs to. Critter, the new leader, would be played by Ben Garrett, who was also Torpedo in the last season. Mudflap, Critter's partner, would be played by Wendy McClendon-Covey, so it's a little Reno 911 reunion. Oh, and Louise gets her ears stolen by this little blonde jackass named Logan. Logan would be played frustratingly well by Kurt Braunohler. Like, I hate the character, but the delivery is done really well. There has never been an episode where I went, you know what? Logan is a positive addition. Rudy? Jimmy J? Oh, you betcha. Hell, I'll even give you there are some okay Tammy episodes. But Logan and his family? The actual worst. His mom, Cynthia, would be played throughout the series by Lindsay Stoddard, who, fun fact, is also in Central Park and the Great North. Louise uses Bob's one favor to have the bikers bully Logan into giving Louise her hat back, and Logan's parents storm Bob's to throw down with the bikers until they all come together as Mudflap gives birth to Critter's kid. On the one hand, this is not an episode I revisit often because I am just not a fan of Logan. But on the other, this is a genuinely solid episode that starts to establish the new season status quo that'll be cemented in Season 4. We're starting to see the series change and start to be more focused around the kids. Granted, that was probably studio notes for the next production cycle of the show, since I'm sure the kids tested incredibly well. But if we look at Seasons 1 and 2 combined, Bob and Linda are the focus of the A's story 16 times over 23 episodes. In Season 3, at most, it's 10 stories not focused around the kids in some way. The main characters of the show are quickly becoming Gene, Tina, and especially Louise. And it's not a bad thing at all that the show is evolving like this. American Dad in its 3rd season was starting to become more and more apolitical and going more deep on the weird stories and Roger's personas. The Simpsons pivoted hard into Bart when he was a huge craze. The jokes are still great, the performances are incredible, and overall, Earsy Rider is a hog wild 8 out of 10. It's our first Halloween episode! This would start the tradition of Bob's Burgers having holiday episodes that obviously would air close to those holidays. I don't know, I kinda appreciate that they're not, say, Treehouse of Horror or Christmas Fighting Magical Santa because reasons. It's just a family on Halloween, and for our first holiday episode, it's kinda incredible. Gene, Tina, and Louise are flying solo this year as they try and hit up King's Head Island to get some of those king-size godsend super bars. While the kids are away, Bob and Linda reluctantly go to Teddy's Halloween party, where this grown-ass man is in a tiger onesie, and I just need to say, the passion Larry Murphy puts into Teddy sells him. That man is always at a 10 and never comes down. So, when Bob accidentally sits on his beloved spray-painted guinea pig, Teddy is on the warpath to find out who did it in a classic murder mystery. While trick-or-treating, the kids run into fellow kids Milo and Ned, played by Paul Rust and Dave Herman, respectively, who inform them that they need to leave soon, or else the teenagers would get them. The teenagers being led by Bryce, played by Joe Latrulio of Brooklyn Nine-Nine and Reno 911. Bryce's crush Amanda would be played by Samantha Shelton. And I know I'm going in depth on everyone in this episode and who they're played by, but almost everyone I've listed is going to show up again in the series. The guest cast for this show is going to get huge, and that's honestly one of the charms of it. The stories work even better because the voices sound so familiar. I'm sure I'm overthinking it, but Bob's Burgers really does a unique thing where they're not quite frequent enough to be supporting cast, but they're around long enough for you to never forget the voice. Unlike, say, Family Guy or The Simpsons, where it's largely 5 or 6 people doing an entire city's worth of voices. It helps share the load. Anyway, the kids get the rest of the trick-or-treaters to attack the teenagers, and they manage to make it home as Teddy makes peace with the fact that his 14-year-old guinea pig wasn't getting any younger. For our first Halloween episode, it's honestly refreshingly normal. The jokes are great, the murder mystery still has that dark comedy that makes Bob's Burgers shine, and it's just, yeah, man, it just works. Full bars is a urine-filled balloon avoiding 8 out of 10. Urine-filled balloon. You didn't have anything else. Bob realizes he had a horrible childhood because he worked in his dad's restaurant all the time. And after breaking his beloved soap dog, Bob decides to fire the kids so they can just be kids and enjoy their summer. So the kids go out and are immediately bored out of their minds. They go on down and find a blueberry orchard run by Beverly and Cooper, played by real-life power couple Megan Mullally and Nick Offerman. Nick Offerman, of course, going on to be the dad in the Great North. They get told to distribute blueberries through town to very select clientele. Yeah, they're puff passing out people's undercover deliveries. One of the purveyors would be played by Doug Benson. All of this while Bob and Linda need help at the restaurant, so they take Mickey in fresh off of being in jail. Mickey's still played by comedic legend Bill Hader, who just does an absolutely spectacular job, like always. Mickey sleeps in the basement and is trying to dig a pathway under the bank with smooth Rastafarian grooves hiding his digging so Bob doesn't get suspicious. Bob catches him, not hard. They find out the kids are unintentionally touting toke trunks and go off to the farm to confront Beverly and Cooper, who I think are Mickey's parents? They know each other and it just sort of makes sense, but I could be way off base on that. The DEA raid and the kids go back to the nice, safe, boring restaurant. The last 2 episodes were solid. Up, down, left, and right, they are good episodes. But this one felt like the best of early Bob's Burgers and showed they still know how to tell these dumb in the best way stories. Like Bob's very innocent idea of trying to give the kids the freedom he didn't have ends up getting them involved in a blueberry smuggling operation. That's the charm of Bob's Burgers. Even at its most absurd, it still feels kinda real. Bob Fires the Kids is a left and right pedaling 9 out of 10. You know how you just find an episode that sings for you? That episode you can always come back to no matter what? Mutiny on the Windbreaker's that episode for me. The captain of a cruise ship comes into Bob's Burgers and has a burger that just blows him away. So he begs Bob to come and enjoy dinner on his cruise ship, with his kids, of course, being welcome as well. Everyone gets on the boat, the captain takes off, and that's our episode. The captain has gone rogue and is holding the family hostage on a cruise ship, and it's perfect. Captain Flarty would actually be played by Jeffrey Tambor, who was also Len Trexler in Archer, another John Benjamin-led series. He's just sort of a perfect character, capybara and all. It's a sort of vignette episode where you're rapidly hopping across stories as you see Bob actively trying to escape, being, held against his will to cook for the ship, and Linda and the kids just having a good time. Linda playing the slots and gambling, Louise goes all Lady Deathstrike with a mani-pedi, Tina is too young for a massage, and Jean has a weird crush thing with a ventriloquist puppet manatee. Every one of these stories is done masterfully. I mean, you get every joke out of those situations as possible, just boom, boom, boom. There is never a slow moment in the episode, and it has this very panicked energy just under the surface, accented by the fantastic soundtrack. Also, oh my god, Dave Herman as Duval might be one of my favorite voices he's ever done. Can you tell it's Dave Herman? Absolutely. Do you care? Absolutely not. It's amazing. He's just so French and so up his own ass in the best way possible. It also shows that Bob is the most level-headed member of the family a lot of the time. He has his slipping moments, but they were in active danger and he's trying his best to get out. He wasn't the active antagonist. He's just trying to save his family from a food-poisoned, vomit-inducing cruise that makes Margaritaville look like Viking. I love this episode, and it's easily one of my favorite of the entire show. And it shows why the show can be such a comfort show to some people. Even in a situation you could argue is jumping the shark, everything is still potentially normal. It's familiar, and they're able to make it just another vacation for the Belchers. It's funny, it's some of the best delivery of the show, and just utterly phenomenal. Mutiny on the Windbreaker is a Kiki approved 10 out of 10. We had our first Halloween, and now it's time for our first Thanksgiving episode. Thanksgiving is Bob's favorite holiday of the year. He adores having his family together and making the best turkey he can, and it's honestly really sweet how much he loves his family and actually looks forward to spending time with them. He might complain, but you never question if he loves Linda or the kids. Well, Mr. Fishorder comes to the restaurant to hire Bob to cook for Thanksgiving, while Linda and the kids pretend to be Mr. Fishorder's family so he can seduce his longtime crush who loves breaking up families. The kids compete for fun bucks, and Linda is keeping the act up so they can get their rent covered for a few months. Bob's trying to make the best of it by trying to pull the kids into the kitchen and try to have his own sort of holiday, but they're more focused on the prizes they can win. So he gets drunk on absinthe, has a My Neighbor Totoro hallucination, and then snaps. It's kind of funny how the holiday episodes get progressively weirder this season. Like the Christmas episode is just something else, but this is still fantastic. It's not my favorite Thanksgiving episode, but I really respect the creativity on display here. They literally parody the My Neighbor Totoro scene where they're making the plant grow into the sky shot for shot. I mean, yes, you see a Totoro figure in Louise's room. It's not crazy to think the people that work on animated shows like Miyazaki movies, but to sneak a reference like that into a broadcast animated series? We've come a long way. Bart wouldn't have cosplayed Zorro in the 2000s. It's just a fun thing to see, and it shows that there's a real creative heart at the core of the show. These people love making the show, and you can really tell. An indecent Thanksgiving proposal is a shot put sniping 9 out of 10. Just so many of my favorite episodes are in this season. And the funny part, not even the best season. Just a really, really, really great one. Bob convinces Mr. Fishorder to buy the mechanical shark used in the Deepening 3 Deepening, since it was filmed in their town. They get the shark set up at Wonder Wharf, give Christy Sanducci left-handed scissors, which is a very underappreciated joke, and everything is copacetic until, of course, the kids have to ruin it. Louise wants the shark's fin for mechanical shark fin soup. Tina wants to free the poor creature so it can be free to be a mechanical shark, which is absolutely Tina needing a Free Willy adventure. So they proceed to mess up. The shark falls on its side and starts thrashing as it powers on and steadily hops its way from Wonder Wharf right up to Bob's block, and when you know it, Bob's block captain. So Bob has to combat a giant mechanical shark that ends up falling in a hole and then burrowing under Bob's restaurant. That last bit where Mort, Teddy, and Bob all come together to stop the shark, and Teddy even getting some closure from his time as an extra, perfect. The show could have ended with this episode if it wanted to and gone out on the highest of notes. I mean, throughout the episode, you have Bob interacting with the entire community we've seen up until this point. He has to save his part of the town. He has to save his neighborhood. And he does come up with some creative ideas, I will give him that. But seeing Hugo just sort of mocking him the entire time, that's how you know it's a good episode. If Hugo's there, it's pretty much even better. But this isn't a finale. We're only 6 episodes into the season, and it's just a completely and totally normal everyday episode, and everything will be fixed by next week, minus the ice cream machine. I genuinely love this episode, and it's easily one of the best episodes of the show, bar none. The Deepening is a free to swim 10 out of 10. Bob decides to teach Tina how to drive in a mostly empty parking lot. He thinks it'll be a great bonding moment between the two, until Tina manages to rear-end one of the few cars in the lot, and it just also so happened to be Jimmy Pesto's car. Bob wants to lie about the whole thing so their rates don't go up and so Tina doesn't get in trouble, and while their car is in the shop, Mort drives the family around in his hearse and they start asking more and more of him. The Mort stuff is honestly a great little Mort adventure, and we don't get a ton of those. It's kind of fun to have Mort be in a story, even if they're few and far between. The A story, I don't know. Tina, I think, is just awkward enough for it, but what saves it is absolutely their insurance adjuster. See, he knows they're lying and he covers it up for them so that they'll come over to his house for a barbecue and conveniently, unknowingly burn down his house for the insurance money. And their insurance adjuster is played brilliantly by Bob Odenkirk. Good old Saul is in this episode, and he's fantastic. He genuinely elevates the A story to a point that I actually want to revisit it from time to time, when I know without him, or if it was just Dave Herman or something, I would zone out every single time. Tina is a lot, but she's supposed to be, and you can see she's grappling with being dishonest. She doesn't want to be. She does have a good heart at her very core, and we'll see that with the other kids as well. Overall, the episode isn't the best and definitely not the worst. It's perfectly middle of the road. Tina-rannosaurus Rex is a flame-broiled 7 out of 10. Now this might be the worst episode of the season. Linda goes on a diet where she can only eat the skins of foods, while Gene gets pushed into his first real relationship with the necklace-sucking Courtney. Courtney would actually be played by David Wayne, who you'd recognize as the warden from Super Jail, but he's also a prolific writer and director who, fun fact, directed Wet Hot American Summer, and plenty of Wet Hot American Summer stars would show up in the show. Man's top-notch, and Courtney is just the worst. Bob tries to coax Gene to break up with her if he's not happy with her, and he doesn't want to break her heart. He tries to practice how to break up with her with Tina and Louise, but when he sees her dead setup from being a jingle writer, he tries to soldier through to play with all the fancy tech. Courtney's dad, Doug, would be played by Mentok the Mind Taker himself, John Michael Higgins, who will become a recurring cast member. Courtney's friend Rupa would be played by Kulop Vilaysack, and she'd also show up as several different characters throughout the series. Gene snaps at Courtney, makes her heart act up, and she and her dad scare him to get even with him for not being honest with her. The episode never failed at what it was trying to do. I just find Courtney so grating I can't enjoy the episode, and that's just because David Wayne plays her so perfectly. She is supposed to be the most annoying thing you've ever experienced, just like Gene, who is also super annoying sometimes. They're kids, they're gonna be weird, they're gonna be awkward, and yeah, they're gonna annoy the hell out of you sometimes. It's a perfect reflection of how awkward middle school was all those years ago, and sometimes you just don't like what you see. The unbearable like-ness of Gene is a silent love, supplying 6 out of 10. And here's our Christmas episode. Bob's uncle is dead, and he left Bob a storage unit. Yay. And when they go down to see what all is in there, they run into just some guy living in it named Chet. Chet would be played by Zach Galifianakis, who would also take on the role of Felix Fischoeder starting in the next season. Chet stays with the Belchers and even starts doing window displays in the lead up to Christmas. We then find out that Chet believes he was a mannequin that was brought to life. Yup. He had a love that he got separated from, so the family have to find his still mannequinized soulmate. The family finds her at a fuzzy handcuff-selling paraphernalia shop run by a shop owner played by Fred Stoller. The kids give up the money they were going to have for presents to buy Chet's wife from the shop owner, and everyone bonds over storage unit fixins. While there always is this wonder if Chet was actually a mannequin or not, again, it's weird but normal. It's out there yet familiar. It's flawed, but what family isn't? The episode just has such an incredible tempo and never really lulls. It is joke after joke and even manages to have an emotional core with a mannequin man. Zach Galifianakis is honestly a perfect addition to the show, and much like Bob Odenkirk, he brings this episode over the edge and really makes it sing. His delivery with Chet is just so matter-of-fact that he genuinely believes he was a mannequin, and you start to wonder, maybe he was. And that's his ability when he throws his voice. Zach Galifianakis will make you believe whatever he wants you to when you hear him behind a character, much like Felix Fischoeder. He is a wonderful part of the show and really makes this episode stand out. I cannot emphasize that enough. Mort's mom, also fantastic. Love seeing her. You know, it just has that wonderful dark humor energy to it. When he has that horror display because he's just feeling completely lost and devastated, that's amazing. That's incredible. That's just good TV. And they're pushing the boundaries of what broadcast animated comedies could do, and that's fantastic. Bob Rest Ye Gentle Mannequins is a Kim Cattrall channeling 9 out of 10. Get it? Because she was the mannequin in Mannequin. When Louise and Linda keep fighting, Linda is determined to bond with Louise whether she wants it or not. She decides to take her to a mother-daughter bonding group led by Dakota, played by returning great Tim Heidecker. Linda bribes Louise to stick around, and they start competing against Logan and Cynthia from earlier in the season. The B story? Tina gets self-conscious about her leg hair and wants it shaved or waxed off. So Bob and Jean go to get her legs waxed and end up getting their own waxed instead. Bribes to stay in a bonding group and group leg waxing. What a show. While I don't like Logan, I will admit he's actually a great inclusion in this episode, and it might be my favorite Logan episode out there. He and Louise work great together, and again, Tim Heidecker is an absolute gem in this episode, and I love how they're bringing on metacomic pros like Tim Heidecker and Zach Galifianakis onto the show. They just bring such a great weird energy to the episodes, and again, this is a very real episode that highlights the weirdness of everyday life. Linda and Louise bonding over laser tag is great, and seeing Bob and Jean scratching each other's legs actually gives them a deeper bond, which we saw them struggling with earlier in the seasons. It's the small things that bring a family together, and sometimes it's just getting your legs waxed in solidarity, and I genuinely love that. It's just very simple elements that are elevated, and it shines because of it. Mother-daughter laser razor is a hair-raising 8 out of 10. When a Nude Beach opens, Louise thinks of doing guided tours, and Hugo quits being a health inspector to join his undressed ilk. The replacement health inspector is Tommy, played by Fred Armisen. Bob lets Tommy perform in the restaurant, and he is just the absolute worst. But he blackmails Bob with mouse pellets, so Bob has to go and get Hugo back to make things right. The kids go through brambles, confront a two-headed goat, and strive to look at old, naked, wrinkled bodies. Honestly, everything else in the episode is pretty forgettable, but every time I see Bob competing against Hugo in the Nude Olympics to get him to come back, I lose it. It's this great frenemies bond where Bob knows deep down that he needs Hugo, and Hugo deep down knows he needs Bob. So they compete against each other, Hugo sees the light, and the kids climb through the bushes just to see the old people of the city on full display. Again, weird, but makes sense for the show. It's not my favorite episode, but it's still got a lot of charm and is perfectly middle of the road. And that's absolutely not a bad thing. Again, there are more episodes for each season now. You're gonna have episodes that are still just perfectly fine, that you put on in the background and don't really pay attention to. And I think Nude Beach is a perfect, just put it on in the background, don't think about it, and let it play. You'll listen to Tommy sing and go, wait, is that Fred Armisen? Wait, that's bad. I don't know how to feel about that. If you pay attention, yeah, it slugs in a lot of parts, but if you're a very passive viewer, it works. Which, when a show is being designed for streaming and broadcast and reruns, you have to make some episodes that, yeah, the concept is simple, but it still works. Nude Beach is a rat-free 7 out of 10. If there was ever a perfect episode of the season, it's absolutely Broadcast Wagstaff School News. It's a kid-centric episode that really shows they can carry episodes at this point. Tina is a part of the school news group under Mr. Grant, who would be played by recurring guest star Will Forte, who would also be in the main cast as Wolf in The Great North. Mr. Grant tells Tina she needs to find a gripping story, even if it's not real. Tammy is also just the worst in this episode as one of the anchors. So, while Tina is talking to Mr. Bronca, she finds out about a heinous, foul, truly terrifying menace, a serial pooper, aptly codenamed the Mad Pooper. Tina goes deep on the investigative side while she's slandered and accused of being the Mad Pooper by the news team. That alone could fill an entire episode, but the B story is equally enchanting. Louise convinces Jean he's turning into Bob, so Jean spends the entire episode pretending to be his dad. Between Bob and Jean competing to be the better Bob and Tina going all Dateline on the Mad Pooper, this episode perfectly encapsulates the weirdness and familial bonds that make this show so unique. Everyone is written at their absolute best, and I would argue this is a benchmark episode of the series. Not only does it show that Bob and Linda can be supporting characters to their kids' adventures, but the school has been built out in a way that it can carry the weight of other episodes in the future. Their teachers have more personality, and with Mr. Grant being introduced, the adults in the room are allowed to be dumber and act more and more out there. Frond isn't the only antagonistic adult at the school anymore. Miss Schumer is just doing her job and loves her cats. But Frond and Grant will absolutely use the kids to chase their own ideas of success, and that's honestly great. It's reminiscent of The Simpsons, but going even deeper in on it. Also, make Zeke better somehow. Zeke's the mad pooper because my parents move around a lot. And it's just like, you know what? That was delivered so flatly, I'll absolutely give it a pass. That's wonderful. Fantastic. Broadcast Wagstaff School News is a 24/7 news ticking 10 out of 10. Pancake hearts just aren't doing it for Linda for Valentine's Day anymore. So after the kids tell Bob they know what she wants, they go on a town-wide search. First for little baby figurines, and then for a love testometer that Bob remembered from their first date. The B story? Linda does speed dating for all her miserable single friends. Now right there, it could just be some generic Simpsons clone episode. How does Bob's Burgers make this unique? Sergeant Bosco shows up to the speed dating and starts breaking everyone down into their worst selves until Linda steals an officer's firearm and things go sideways. And the love testometer? Bob remembered it from a different date with a different girl. This is just more perfect Bob's Burgers. It's awkward and weird, and that's what makes it great. Teddy shouting out all the worst parts of him? Genius. And I think this episode does so well because we know the supporting cast at this point so well. Bosco, Hugo, Ron, Teddy, Mort, Gretchen, and Mailman Mike all make appearances this episode, and we've learned enough about them that they actually add an extra layer to everything, even giving us more of Bosco as he becomes a much more frequent visitor. And if we look at it as a holiday episode, it's kind of a return to normal. No one's thinking they're mannequins, no one's doing crazy adventures, but Linda's speed dating still goes sideways, and Bob messed up the testometer. They are still a flawed family, and that absolutely shines. Is it the best episode? Absolutely not. But it has all the weird elements that make the show the gem it is. My Fuzzy Valentine is a love-tested 8 out of 10. Bob gives Linda a not-so-stellar customer evaluation, and Linda decides to get a job at a grocery store to bring in some extra income where she could be appreciated more. And that's the main conflict of the episode, with the kids all doing their own adventures in the grocery store. Louise tying shrimp to balloons being my absolute favorite of the side stories. It's just perfectly diabolical. Jean gets free samples, and Tina helps stock milk when she runs into the bandaged finger of a mystery man, Josh, played by Ben Schwartz. Greg the manager would also be played by Matt Besser. But the thing to pay attention to is that this is the first episode that had a dedicated musical number in it. This is where the characters just break into song for some reason. And they've had unique songs in some episodes, but this is showing the turn into a musical series, much like Family Guy in its earlier seasons. This is something that will turn into songs at the end of every episode, and a writing culture that would be carried over to the Great North. It's such a core element in the later seasons, it's just charming to see where it all began. Are they amazing singers? Absolutely not, but that makes it that much better in my book. You can hear the passion in what they're doing, and just even hearing John Benjamin going, grind, 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 they're able to turn that into a proper melody. They know what they're going for, and I think they genuinely achieve it right out the gate. It's another benchmark episode that really shows the formula of Bob's Burgers starting to be cemented, and it could absolutely be a lot worse than what we got, with this being a little bit more experimental. L'Independent Woman is a clearance sale avoiding 9 out of 10. Jean can't take care of anything and then finds a smart toilet in the woods and wants to save it thinking it's actually alive. Oh, and there's a guy named Max Flush who's looking for that there smart toilet. And Max Flush would be played by Neil Flynn from Scrubs and The Middle. The smart toilet would actually be voiced by John Hamm of all people, and still, even with those two great guest stars, this episode's just not for me. It's E.T. with a toilet and Jean. It's fine. Personally, it's right down there with the Unbearable like-ness. It's just one of the weakest episodes of the entire season, and one episode I just don't revisit. The jokes are okay, the focus on Gene just feels so forced, and I don't know. Gene episodes are really hit or miss for me, and I think it's just because he's so loudly awkward, I guess. Tina, you expect every episode with her is weird and she melts down. Louise be scheming. Gene is either scared of something and has to overcome that fear, or has a creative idea that he's determined to pursue. Some Gene B stories are great. The one where he's in a table setting contest later in this season, I absolutely adore. I just think he's the hardest character to write, and either they really, really work, or they really, really don't. And they save the toilet and it gets put on a ferry to its rightful owners, and Gene shows he can handle responsibility. Woohoo, I guess? It's just a weird episode that feels like it never found its footing. OT, the outside toilet, is a low-flow efficient 6 out of 10. When a substitute teacher / Thomas Edison LARPer takes over Louise's science class, he bans baking soda volcanoes as lazy science experiments for the upcoming science fair. And so Louise has to come up with a new plan and take down this teacher that got in her way. Mr. Dinkler would actually be played by Mark Proksch, famous for What We Do in the Shadows and On Cinema at the Cinema, equally. They're both equally important. YouTube it. This would also be the first appearance of the school librarian, Mr. Ambrose, played by Billy Eichner. And while most people know Billy Eichner for stuff like Parks and Rec or Billy on the Street, know he's a very expressive actor, it's kinda great that he can put that same energy into his voice acting that really makes Mr. Ambrose so much more annoying and dramatic in the best way. He's just so much all the time, and he's encouraging Louise by telling her to look up Topsy to take down Edison. Topsy, of course, being the very real elephant that Thomas Edison actually really electrocuted at Coney Island and became a video people could watch whenever they visited. Which is very reminiscent of Archer in a way. Archer makes obscure history and literary jokes all the time, and here the kids are turning the struggle of Topsy into a romantic musical between Topsy and Edison, with Tina playing Topsy and Gene playing Edison, with Mr. Fischoeder and Gail playing their singing voices. Louise has Teddy set up an actual shock plate under Tina to show off what actually happened, which could go so bad, so fast. Tina thankfully survives, and Louise clashes with her teacher. I mean, other than the almost flash-fried Tina, it was a good idea that just went off the rails. I genuinely love this episode, and it has some of the best writing of the show, a song that can't get out of your head, and that's Megan Mullally singing opposite Kevin Kline in a broadcast animated comedy. It stands out. Electric Love is kind of a bop, that's all I'm saying. Teddy is also just terrific this episode, and we're starting to lean more and more into Teddy just being a mainstay of every adventure to some degree. He's always doing something worth watching. Topsy is a shockingly good 10 out of 10. The school dance is coming up, and Tina can't decide between the ballet student Josh from L'Independent Woman and the bad boy Jimmy Pesto Jr., so she decides to try and have them both, because of course she would. Josh's friend Douglas would be played by Gabe Liedman, who was also the showrunner for Q-Force, funnily enough. Jimmy Pesto Jr. gets Gene and Louise to try and get Tina to pick him, and yeah, that's the episode. By the end, Josh and Jimmy Pesto Jr. are having a dance-off and start up a bromance, and both leave Tina. The B story? Linda gives Bob the full school dance experience since he didn't get to go to his when he was a kid. Their chaperones for this school dance get drunk and vomit on themselves. That being said, it is a very sweet thing that Linda is still trying to help Bob live experiences and genuinely does love him. It's a really great contrast of their weird, awkward selves that love each other no matter what, and Tina just sort of entranced by dancing butts. You always know Bob and Linda care about each other, and they actually show why they work together. Of course, the episode is meant to feel awkward because it's a Tina episode, but the A story does feel like it drags quite a bit, and you probably could have just added in a C story to take away some of the pressure. The episode is perfectly fine. It never does anything amazingly, but doesn't make you scream into the void. I don't know. I wish we had more cemented resolution with Tina going forward, and we just sorta never do. Tina is the one character that spins her wheels the most, and it's very obvious. 2 for Tina is a dance-off encouraging 7 out of 10. This is an episode. When the Belchers go to visit Linda's parents in Florida, the kids are ecstatic to use the pool, but it's closed for cleaning, and so they decide to help an old lady get proof that her dog was ate by a python, which she'll pay them for. Helen would be played by Linda Lavin. They go into the, forest, jungle, Everglades, while Gene stays back, absolutely terrified of snakes, and refuses to go until, guess what? He gets the courage to face his fears and goes in to save his sisters, who have actually found Helen's beloved Bitsy in one piece. Aw, so sweet! What a perfectly normal Bob's Burgers story. How nice. And now the kids got their money. Delightful. The A story? Do we have to worry about all that? Come on! The kids save a dog. He to the haw. Yeah, no, Linda's parents have moved into a swinger community, and because they aren't participating, they're going to be kicked out with nowhere else to go and potentially moving in with the family. Bob is determined to not let that happen and has Al open up about his love of balloons, because once you pop, you just can't stop. They finally start to get into the swing of things, and the day is saved. If it was any other show, this wouldn't work. They don't make it all that fantastical or exaggerated. This is a loofah community. It's exactly as weird as you think a swinger community would be in Florida. The jokes are still great, the kid story doesn't go on for too long, and I actually like that Gene tries to get involved and has an understandable fear he's getting over. Big snakes, an understandable, justifiable fear. Good for Gene for facing it. And even that last bit with the Bitsy and the snake again highlights the themes of the show. Weird familial bond. It Snakes a Village is a team player. 8 out of 10. It's time for Family Fracus. Local celebrity Chuck from Beef Squatch is hosting a brand new show, Family Fracus, and the Belchers decide to enter to hopefully win a new car. They keep winning and infuriating Chuck, who then helps Jimmy Pesto cheat, and they go to Pam's new court show to argue over it. And that's the whole idea to the episode, and it's great. The producer helps Chuck sabotage the case because of course he would, and Jimmy Pesto gets a brand new minivan. The episode has major season 1 energy, and I love how it just sort of all breaks down around them. It reminds me a lot of like Lobster Fest, where Bob is understandably outraged when people refuse to help him after he gave him a party of a lifetime. This episode, more than most, hangs on the jokes and the conversations. It's very much more just cut to scene A, cut to scene B. Hey, look, it's Chuck and Pam. Remember them? And most of the episode just happens on TV sets. And that's great. It's experimental in a weirdly isolated and almost claustrophobic way. They are at the whim of the studio. And even after Jimmy Pesto, this horrible, horrible guy, treats Bob like trash, mocks him, talks down to him, takes the van that Bob desperately needs, and when Bob has a perfectly good chance to mock Jimmy, to give him some of what he was dishing out, his family tells him it was too much. He went too far. And even with Jimmy continuing to just dig at him and mock him, Bob helps him change the tire on his car. Bob genuinely cares what his family thinks and wants to do right by them, even if it means helping his enemy. And that's what Jimmy Pesto is. This episode has cemented that Jimmy Pesto has little to no redeeming factors. He is just the actual worst, though. I know we'll get some episodes that kind of humanize him, but yeah, no, he's just horrible. Family Fracus is a foam-covered 8 out of 10. Bob cuts himself and he and Linda have to go to the hospital. So without the parents around, the kids decide to do what any kid would do in their position, open an underground betting hall. Bob gets easily one of the worst doctors imaginable who keeps messing up his hand. Dr. Eigerman would be played by Johnny Pemberton, who you probably recognize from the Fallout show. And for the longest time, I thought it was Michael Cera. And just, for the longest time, I was dead wrong. Sometimes I'm just a freaking idiot. He brings a great naivete to the character that makes him just genuinely hard to hate. He's just so sunshine and rainbows, even as he does horrible stitching. The kids are doing well while this is going on, and Jean is starting up a girl group to perform at the casino until a man in a white suit decides to play their games. It's Louise, the pit boss, versus Mr. Fishodor. I actually really love this dynamic, and it happens somewhat frequently through the show. Louise and Mr. Fishodor are both con artists in their own ways, and Louise always seems to get more and more complex schemes after she loses to Mr. Fishodor. At first, every time she loses to him, she gets more and more agitated. But as you go through the show, she starts to really figure out who Mr. Fishodor is, and he has a sense of respect for her over time. Well, after going deep in the red at a game of rock, paper, scissors, it's up to Bob to throw the impossible scissors and settle the score. It's graphic, it's kids running betting halls, and just more of that weirdness that makes Bob's Burgers absolutely shine. It's another episode I just genuinely love and has that very natural delivery in everyone's voices that treats everything so matter of fact. The Kids Run the Restaurant is a doubling down on rock, 9 out of 10. When Gail can't take Tina to the Boyz for Now concert, she and Louise have Zeke's cousin Kevin drive them. Kevin, played by the returning great Jack McBrayer. The girls go to see the show, and Louise gets her first crush on Boo Boo, the booster seat needing, lead singer of the boy band. Boo Boo would be played by Max Greenfield of New Girl fame. Tig Notaro would also guest star as the band's bus driver, Jody. Louise is just completely and utterly compelled to smack the ever-loving daylights out of Boo Boo, so they sneak on the bus and get their wish. It's so great to see Louise being just a kid. There is no scheme, there is no extra plan, she just has this overflowing need to smack a tiny blonde man. And yet, the B story absolutely overshadows it, and I'm not even mad. Jean is going to the regional championships of table setting with Bob and Linda. I honestly don't even want to get too into it. It genuinely needs to be seen to be believed, because let me tell you, it's some of the funniest line delivery of the entire show. I know I've said, Jean episodes are wishy-washy, but Eugene Merman does such a great job with Jean in this episode that you kind of understand why they have Jean there at all. The way he's presenting his menstrual celebration, he's just so confident, so amazing. He's just showing off a second impromptu setting with, a tampon straw. Enchanting. Utterly enchanting. Everyone is being weird this episode, and it's just great. The way the kid's dad breaks down when he doesn't win, good. It's good. You have to watch it. Boyz for Now is a slap happy 9 out of 10. These seasons are so long. We'll finish strong. It's the museum field trip. Bob is chaperoning and helping Mr. Frond while Linda is at home. Everyone has to buddy up, so Jean is with Zeke, who pulls out a memory map, Louise is with everyone's favorite regular-sized guy, Rudy, and Tina is with the nerd she hopes she can fix, Henry. Rudy and Henry would go on to be recurring characters played by Brian Husky and Jim Gaffigan, respectively. They're both great in their roles and add a ton to the show, as we'll see later on. Linda closes the restaurant to be with the kids and starts protesting with the striking museum workers, while Frond flirts with a docent and Louise, Rudy, and Bob sneak off to another exhibit. There's bonding between Bob and Louise, even having Louise say she'd run the restaurant one day. Jean begins to appreciate Zeke's escapades. Tina and Henry figure out they were trying to fix each other, and Rudy got his inhaler. It's another perfect Bob's Burgers episode. Everyone is their best selves, and it really shows they're still getting more and more creative as they build out the world. It's got some of the best jokes of the season, flows super well, and they always seem to give each story just enough time to really shine. If you had to show someone what Bob's Burgers was, Perfectly encapsulated in just one episode, I think Carpe Museum would be your best choice. It has everything that makes this show so unique. I mean, have you noticed how the art has steadily improved? They haven't changed the base designs, but they're getting way more comfortable with them. New characters don't look too off, and they're starting to come up with a much better design book. And while this is a nice introduction to Rudy, it's very obviously not his best episode, though he will be more included later on. Again, I mean, Brian Husky makes Rudy, everybody loves regular-sized Rudy. And I love the fact that not only do we get regular-sized Rudy, we get tiny Rudy. He's just like, hey! Like, I love that. Perfect. Fantastic. It's just, this is when you know Bob's Burgers has really hit its stride. Carpe Museum is a Sands from Exotic Lands loving 10 out of 10. And here we are, the season finale. Gene is horrible at baseball, and Bob gets a fancy new espresso machine that gets Tina addicted to sweet lady caffeine. Linda wants to give Gene a chance to shine and signs him up for the Duke of Diamonds training camp after pawning Bob's espresso machine. The Duke of Diamonds is also just the Prince of Persuasion back from Dr. Yap, which is wonderful. I don't know, it builds on him just being a total loser that people keep somehow believing in. Tina starts to go through withdrawal, and the Duke takes the boys to go intimidate the owner of the hotel that he hasn't paid. Mr. Manoogian, played by a comedy great and easily one of the best voice actors out there, Jason Mantzoukas. Close enough was taken way too soon. Bob tries to prove that the Duke is a fluke, and when Gene actually manages to hit a ball, gets his confidence, and Bob loses. You know the episode, but it's honestly a perfect season finale, and it's a Gene episode of all things. A Gene episode where he's scared of the ball and has to conquer his fear, but the elements around that are so almost depressingly skeevy that it works. Gene is getting confidence boosts from the teachings of an inkjet printer repairman. This is the weirdness of Bob's Burgers, and this is its charm. Their world isn't perfect, they aren't perfect, but they always go on some weird and wild adventure. This is easily one of my favorite episodes of the entire series, and I know I've said that about a lot of episodes this season, but this and season 4 honestly feel like the perfected Bob's Burgers formula. It's that perfect blend of weirdness, dark comedy, and still being borderline family friendly that makes it especially stand out. In the first season, you could even argue it was a Family Guy clone since they had cutaways, but by the end of this season, it's really taken on an identity all its own. You can be spun around and sat down and asked to describe each character and know exactly who they are off the top of your head, and it's because episodes like The Unnatural and Carpe Museum flesh them out so perfectly. They've really tapped into what makes the show such a cultural phenomenon at this point, and they're going to go even more wild with it next season. The Unnatural is a no cream, no sugar 10 out of 10. And there we have it, that's season 3! Anything you think I was right on, wrong on? What was your favorite episode? Least favorite? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like what you saw, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Honestly, yeah, we were still very much in the ascent of the new age animated comedy juggernaut. Season 3 didn't reinvent the wheel or pivot away from anything. It just kept polishing the ideas we saw in the past 2 seasons while adding even more musical elements. And next season, frankly, even better. Season 4 is just sort of the best in my book. We'll get the kids in a dumpster, the invasion of the Yapfish, and an Emmy award-winning episode? So don't snore when we talk about Season 4. Anyway, that's going to do it for us here at the Lecture Hall. Want to support the channel? Consider joining our Patreon or membership programs today. $2 a month and you'll get special updates, polls, and even your name on this fancy list. Woo! Thank you all so much for watching, and especially now, remember to stay strong, keep fighting that good fight, and know even if you just woke up today, I'm proud of you. Things are always darkest before the dawn, and I genuinely believe in you. You got this. Goodbye, everybody. I'll see you all next time.